So when the checklist was first of all introduced and, if you like, imposed on us from top down, I struggled myself to understand the relevance to my practice. I've always regarded myself as highly professional, and so consenting the patient, knowing what I'm doing, planning my list. I've always informally had a briefing with theatre staff anyway, so what is this adding? Perhaps the only benefit for me was that, because I'm so lousy at remembering members of staff's names, as we all introduced ourselves, that was handy to me. But otherwise I felt it was really just ticking another box, another checklist, another, if you like, yet another check of patients whether they have allergies. And it's really only when one has an incident and it exposed the fallibility of myself and the system that I truly understood that this isn't about just ticking a box. There's a real purpose to it, which is to protect the patient and protect ourselves, because as humans we can all make mistakes. What I'd like to do is just tell you the story of how it happened, because as with everything, nothing is straightforward. I'm a thyroid surgeon, and for those in the audience who don't know much about thyroids, they're shaped like a butterfly. There's a left side and a right side, and I do one of two operations: either remove one half or the whole thyroid. I had a lady come along, a 23-year-old, with a hard lump in the thyroid, which I was almost certain was going to be a cancer. And by deciding whether it is, we do a needle biopsy, and it couldn't tell us precisely. So in order to get a diagnosis, she needed half a thyroid to be removed to find out what it was. And if it was a cancer, we'd then remove the whole thyroid. So she was put on the list as an urgent to have the left half of her thyroid removed. Now, the day before, our chief executive at the time sacked someone very important as a clinical manager very unexpectedly, and it was huge news. And in fact, I was summoned by the chief executive the morning of my operating list for the chief executive to explain the reasons behind it. I had slightly advanced warning, so we delayed the theatre start time. But clearly my mind was very much on what was going on the politics before I got to theatre that day. And on the theatre list we had 4 thyroid operations, and the lady in question was case number 3. The first 2 cases took a while, and so we ran through lunchtime to carry on with the list, as often we do. To do that, therefore, various members of staff in the regular team would go off and have lunch breaks and would be backfilled by other members of staff who were familiar but weren't part of the core team. Also at the same time, to make time, as I was finishing case number 2, my registrar went and consented the patient in question for her operation. He then got called away to an emergency. I dashed outside to grab a sandwich while the next patient in question is having an anaesthetic, and was confronted by another clinical director wanting to know, if you like, all the gossip of what was going on and what the consequences were of this person who'd been sacked the day before. The WHO list on this patient did take place, but while I was outside of theatre. So by the time I'm going into theatre to operate, the patient's prepared, and my registrar was still not there, so I'm doing the operation on my own. When I operate on a patient, I operate on the opposite side to the side that's coming out. But because I didn't have an assistant, I started one side and then moved to the other. So any member of staff who would have no problem telling me I'm doing the wrong thing wouldn't really know what I was doing. And then the operation wasn't easy. But eventually I took out half of the thyroid and announced, as I always do, this is the right side thyroid for the histology specimen. And it was only then that Trudy, one of the nurses, said, but it should be the left side. So there was silence, and we composed ourselves, we checked the notes, checked the operating list, checked everything, and the wrong side had been removed. And after a conversation with the anaesthetist and sister and myself, I said, I feel fine, but I really think the other side needs to come out. So we then, after a discussion, proceeded and did that. And in fact, we sent that off for rapid analysis, and it came back as a cancer. Now, I take no consolation that, in fact, the patient had the right operation, but for entirely the wrong reasons. And of course, once we'd let the anaesthetic wear off, I had a long chat with her, obviously telling her diagnosis, and then explaining to her that we'd done the wrong operation. And I promised to her that I would use this experience to help other people learn from it. Now, you'll hear today about the Swiss cheeses and how they line up and the errors occur. And there were a number of distractions, changes in staff, and this and that and the other. And I'm still as professional as I like to think I am now as I was before. And I realize that, you know, we're all human and mistakes take place. And the a checklist is standard practice in many other industries. It's not meant to be a criticism of the lack of professionalism of what we do. It's purely just there because mistakes happen. The ideal world will provide us with the perfect environment where it's quiet, calm, and we're working in a familiar team. But the reality is there's so many distractions now, and we have lost our continuity of junior doctors. We lose our teams in the nursing side, in theatres. It's a much busier place. And so we need all the help and protection that we and the patients can get. And this is just one way of helping to do that in a way that is supportive and shouldn't be threatening.